but I don't know that it's going to be like a Billy King Celtics Nets situation, just because the asset that the team that traded all the picks is getting in return is entirely different.
Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and today's continuation of the What's Next series covers the Golden State Warriors, and things are obviously going to be very different moving forward for this team than they've been over the last couple of seasons. First of all, they're not NBA champions, the Toronto Raptors are, and Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant sustained serious injuries. Durant is going to keep him out of all of next season, and then Klay's is going to keep him out of most of next season. And that's going to change a lot of things for this team. And on the surface, it might seem like things are pretty much a disaster, but that's not really the case at all. They still have options, and a lot of it obviously depends on free agency this summer. But even beyond that, this team is still going to be okay. In an immediate sense, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to be the same kind of team that they have been, that we've become accustomed to over the last few seasons, but they still very much have a plan and a future over the next 4 to 5 seasons. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what's next for the Golden State Warriors. So typically at this point, I go through all of the building blocks for the team that I'm talking about, but it seems a little bit pointless in this scenario because we've all watched the Warriors so many times on national TV and throughout the playoffs and the finals. So we all kind of know what they have on their roster, who some of their better role players are, obviously the stars. So it doesn't really make sense to me to go through the whole building block thing. So I'm just going to get straight to what they have next, what their future is looking like. So as I said briefly in the intro, in an immediate sense, things are going to be a lot different for the Warriors. We don't know if Kevin Durant is going to come back. If Klay Thompson does come back, it's going to be sometime in February or March, like post All-Star break. But the thing is, like, I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, maybe the Warriors don't make the playoffs, and they certainly have some roster moves to make. But they're still going to have Steph, they're still going to have Draymond, and if they can get to the playoffs with a somewhat healthy Klay and make sure that he comes back right, they're still going to be really, really good in the playoffs, and they're going to be a tough out just because of their championship pedigree and just how good some of those players still are. Now, the issue is, in terms of building a roster for next season, they're going to have to bring back their own free agents to have any kind of roster around Steph and Klay and Draymond, because so many of their role player like guys are free agents. And even if Kevin Durant opts out, it kind of seems like that would give them cap space, but that's not the case because Klay's contract is also up and his cap hold is going to put them once again over the cap. So really they've got like the mid-level exception and then re-signing their own free agents and then minimum deals as well to work with to try and build up the roster, and then mid-season they can look at some buyout guys as well. And so the priority will be to re-sign players like Quinn Cook and Kevon Looney, who are both free agents this offseason, and then developing some younger guys like Alfonso McKinney and then Jacob Evans as well. And it would be nice if they were able to convince DeMarcus Cousins to come back in free agency because they need him more now than ever. But in my opinion, it seems pretty unlikely. It seems like, not that maybe he got out of what he wanted to in Golden State, because obviously he would have liked to win a championship, but it just seems like there's a better opportunity out there for him in terms of offensive responsibility, potentially in terms of money, and I just see him playing elsewhere next season. Now, the fact that they do have all these injuries, KD and Klay and all that, might make it a little bit more likely that he does come back to Golden State because he'll have a bigger role with them. But in my opinion, even though I'm sure they would like to have him back, he's probably going to be playing elsewhere next season. So now as we look at free agency as a whole for the Warriors, they're at about $120 million in payroll this offseason, which is over the cap, and they've got KD, Klay, Quinn Cook, and Kevon Looney that are all free agents this offseason, in addition to DeMarcus Cousins. And then in 2020, Draymond and Andre Iguodala are also free agents. Now, the good thing for them is they know that Steph is going to be there next year and Draymond's going to be there next year. They're both under contract, and Iguodala, and it's like a 99% chance that they offer Klay Thompson the 5-year max and he re-signs as well. And then everything beyond that is going to depend, of course, on what happens with Kevin Durant's free agency. Now, I did a video about this talking about how his injury impacts his free agency, but by all accounts and by all reports, if another team other than the Warriors was going to offer Kevin Durant a max pre-injury, then they're still planning on doing so even post-injury, and it seems like the Warriors are going to try and do everything they can to bring him back as well, as they should, and all these teams are just assuming that they're not going to have Kevin Durant for the first year of the contract that he signs. So in my mind, things aren't too much different for his free agency, except for the fact that it might have made it a little bit more likely that he ends up coming back. And if he does re-sign and they do bring back Kevin Durant, then it's pretty simple. They re-sign Klay and KD to maxes. They still have Steph, and they just roll forward with those three, because no matter what else they put around those three players, they're going to be really good. They're going to be championship contenders for the next 3 or 4 seasons with those three guys on the roster, no matter what else they have around them. So if KD does decide to come back and he wants to re-sign, then it's pretty simple to me in terms of what they do moving forward. They're going to have Steph, they're going to have Draymond, and then you've got Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant both re-signing this offseason, and you just roll forward with those 4 guys with it one tiny wrinkle, and that's that I would really explore potentially trading or just letting Draymond Green walk in 2020 free agency. And I know that that's maybe a little bit of a weird suggestion, because it's been proven over the last couple of years that he is at times the heart of this team, but I don't really think that he's going to age all that well. He's going to demand a max contract and potentially a super max if he wins Defensive Player of the Year, makes an All-NBA team, and he has caused issues within the team in the past as well, and I just don't really know that that's a cost that they can afford, and they're still going to be very good, again, if they are able to bring back KD and Klay and then also have Steph, to the point where I don't really know that it's necessary to pay Draymond $30+ million, and you just let another team do that if they want to. Because again, like I said, they're still going to be able to compete for championships, maybe not be the same level team that they've been the last couple of years, but that's not really the expectation at this point anyway. And then obviously their margin for error is going to get smaller and smaller the more that these players age, because Steph and Klay and KD will all be over 30 on their next contract. But it's still just, it doesn't really seem like it makes sense to me to pay Draymond that much money and to have 4 max guys when you already have 3 players that are so good in Steph, Klay, and KD. Now, even if that happens and they trade him or let him walk or whatever, they're still going to be capped out by having 3 max salary guys on the payroll. So they're going to need to be really smart about how they draft, finding good minimum contract players, and then using the mid-level exception as well in free agency to build this team around those 3 players. And again, not bringing back Draymond just kind of prevents them from having any kind of disaster scenario where they're paying 4 max players over a 4 and 5 year period, and then one of them has a steep decline, or 1 or 2 of them has some kind of serious injury, and then suddenly you're paying for 4 max players, but you're only getting like 2 or 3 or maybe even 1 at that point out of that much money. So now the other scenario here is if Kevin Durant doesn't re-sign, he doesn't come back to the Warriors next year, things are pretty much still the same except for on the back end of it. So you obviously still bring back Klay Thompson on a max deal, but again, when you get into 2020 free agency, I would really consider letting someone else sign Draymond Green, or potentially trying to trade him before then, although it's probably unlikely that they're going to be able to do that. And the reasoning for this, and it actually makes more sense in this scenario than it does in the first one, is because if they just bring back Steph and Klay and then they let Draymond walk in the summer 2020 and they don't take on any other significant contracts before then, they let Andre Iguodala walk because his contract is up that summer, then they're going to have significant cap space for the first time in a while, over $30 million worth, to build something around Steph and Klay, because this roster is in desperate need, outside of its stars, obviously, of an infusion of young talent and just role players in depth, like things were when this whole era started, when it was Steph and Klay and Harrison Barnes and Andrew Bogut and all those other guys that provided depth for this team. And that would allow them to kind of get back to that, rather than dumping all of that cap space that they would finally have available into re-signing Draymond Green to a deal that he's probably not going to be worth beyond the first year or 2 of his contract, if that. And I'd like to be able to take a look at the roster and say, hey, they could do this, they could do that, there's trades they can make. But really, I mean, they don't really have that many assets outside of their core guys. And so if they're not able to find a Draymond trade, I don't really know what other directions they look. Their picks are not going to be all that valuable. They don't have any other young players on the roster that are any good in terms of a valuable trade piece. Otherwise, they'd be using them in the finals when all these guys got hurt. So they just have to be smart about bringing back Quinn Cook and Kevon Looney and developing Jacob Evans and developing Alfonso McKinney and drafting well with their late first round picks. And then just kind of rolling from there. And again, the one big move that they have is to try and find a Draymond trade, or just let him walk in 2020 and develop or open up some of that cap space in 2020, assuming that Kevin Durant leaves. If he stays, they won't have that space. But that's really the big decision that they have to make, is what to do about Draymond Green moving forward. And that's just my opinion on what they should do. And in the end, even though it might seem like a bit of a scary situation for the Warriors to be in, I think it's a little bit of a prisoner of the moment kind of thing, where people are freaking out because of all these injuries and stuff. But it's a realistic possibility that this time next year, they've still got Steph, Klay, and KD, and potentially Draymond as well if they decide to re-sign him, and then they're still just rolling forward with those 4 guys, but I just don't really think that would be the best option for them, as I've talked about in this video. But they're still going to be very good, even if KD doesn't come back. Steph is incredible. Klay is incredible. Those guys should come back healthy and should be good for at least the next 3 and 4 seasons, and then develop some of that depth in 2020. They're just going to have to be a little bit smarter about how they spend and how they draft, and kind of building up their roster around their stars that are getting up there in age and are starting to have some injury issues in the case of Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson. And if they can do all that and they can continue to put the right pieces around whatever stars they're able to keep beyond this season or the following, they're still going to be championship contenders. They're still going to be a team to be reckoned with in the Western Conference. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and the second to last What Next video. I've got the last one coming out tomorrow on the Toronto Raptors, so be on the lookout for that. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.